different from APDs. The essence of all debates remains the same. That is, weighing and how you like prove how your paradigm is better in general. But other than that, there are a few more technical nuances in BPDs than APDs, which is why I think all of us think that this is something that is extremely, extremely important to be briefed. So yeah, let us start. Smith, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, great. Please take it over from here.
Right. Am I audible clearly now? Cool. Hello, everyone. Today we'll learn or we'll see what how British parliamentary debates work, how the speaker rules, how benches, and how the whole process of debate goes for British parliamentary debates. Sanjeev, next slide, please. Right. So we have two types of debate. First is Asian parliamentary debate that we had taken sessions before this. And today we'll learn about the second one, that is the British parliamentary debate. Next slide, please, Sanjeev. Right. What we'll look today is first structure of British parliamentary debates, how opening and closing benches work, what are the speaker rules, and what burden of each bench is. And then Ananya will tell you about how adjudicating or judging in British parliamentary debate works. Next slide, Sanjeev. Right. So, what British parliamentary debate look like, and what is the structure of it? So, like APD, there still exists two sides of the house. That is the proposition government and the opposition. So now in government side, there are two benches. That is opening government and closing government. Same goes for the opposition. There are two benches in opposition as well. That is opening opposition and closing opposition. Each bench or each team consists of two speakers. So now, if we have four benches and two speaker each, we will have total of eight speakers. Now, these eight speakers have a particular speaking order, and this is how British parliamentary debates work. So now, I also understand how POIs are why POIs are more important in BPTs rather than in APTs, and which POIs are prioritized. So now let's suppose there is opening opposition. The POI that is preferred for opening opposition is the closing government, and for opening government, the closing opposition. So the procedure of POI is prioritized in the cross manner. This is how the speaker. Right. Next slide. No worries. Yeah. So we saw how the benches work and also what POI preferences are there in British parliamentary debate. Now let's understand how the speaker order works. So as I said, there are four benches. So in the opening government, there is the prime minister and the deputy prime minister. Then in the opening opposition, we have leader of opposition and deputy leader of opposition. This you are aware about. Now a new speaker role comes up here, that is in the closing benches. So for the closing government, we have MOG, that is member of government, and then government whip. Same goes for the opposition closing bench, that is CG. CO, closing opposition, member of opposition, and opposition whip. So as you can see, the speaker role goes PM, LO, DPM, DLO, MOG, MOO, then government whip and opposition whip. So this is how the flow of debate goes through each speaker. Next slide, Sanjeev. Right. So this is how BPD works. In APD, you used to get the three motions and then you used to rank. Then, according to your preferences, the judges would tell you which motion you are debating upon. But in British parliamentary debates, what you get is a single motion that is given by the adjudicator or the judge. So now, after getting that single motion, you get 15 minutes of preparation time, irrespective of your benches. So now you have 15 minutes to prepare on whatever bench you have got. After that, each speaker gets 7 minutes and 15 seconds to speak, and then there are no reply speeches in British parliamentary debates like Asian parliamentary debates. I'll do the opening halves, right? Right. Now let's see. We were talking about opening benches and opening half. What particularly they have to do and what are their basic burdens. Next slide. So opening half. Let's talk about OG and OO. So now in APD, what has to happen as a government? You used to support a particular motion, and as opposition, you have to tell why where their case lacks and why whatever points or word you are bringing into the debate is better. But here in opening government, you need to understand that there is closing government as well. That means there is not only opposition but also a government bench that has to win against you. So what opening government has to do is build something known as a closed case. That means when you get a particular motion, you know it's verbatim. So on that motion, you build such a word or such a case that there are no loopholes present in it for the closing government to extend it. We call them extensions that are improved points or unique points that are given by a particular closing bench. So you need to make sure as a opening bench, as a opening half, that you give such a case, that you give such a word that it is very, very difficult or nearly impossible for closing benches to extend it. Let's talk about opening opposition. As opening opposition, you get to counter what opening government is telling. So now you have two major points as opening opposition. A, you have to counter the points of the opening government, and B, you need to again build such a case using those counters and your own points so that your closing opposition cannot extend upon your own case. So in both the benches, you need to make sure that you analyze the motion in such a way and give speeches in such a way that from 0 to 1 your whole motion is covered, all your points are clear, and then it is very difficult for closing benches to bring in new points. And when they are not able to bring in new points and they are just extending your own points. Oh, so sorry, I got muted. I was saying, what was I saying last? Hello, am I audible? Am I audible? Hello.
Smith, you're audible.
Right. I'll continue. When you give such a case that is very difficult to extend upon, and your closing benches are not able to give substantial points that are unique than yours, that particular scenario or that particular thing we call as the derivatives. That means they are just deriving points from your case. And when that happens, that means you have made a very good and closed policy or case, depends upon the motion. So that's what opening halves do. Yeah. Yeah, over to Debarge for closing us.
Yep. Hi everyone. I guess you all are clear with the opening half. We will take questions once we finish the closing half. We will take questions from for both the houses. So no worries about that regarding, right? Coming to the closing half, what do we understand when we talk about closing half? Simply the other two benches in a BPD, British Parliamentary debate, right? Next slide, please, Sanjeev. Thank you. That means what is closing bench in a BP? You need to understand what is your position. Simply, you are the third and fourth team in the entire debate, right? That means now what your primary burden is. You have to simply go ahead and you have to agree with your opening bench side, but not their story, right? What do I mean by story? Will be further fleshed, right? That means what my goal is different from like probably the opening half, right? My goal is probably like different from the opening in terms of like not having, we are not kind of some backup. Like if opening half is messing up with the points of arguments we bring into the debate, we are not like houses that will clean the mess up that is done by the opening half. We are simply independent team probably like going ahead and competing like against all the houses, even if it's our opening house, like closing government can go ahead and see that opening government has spoken shit. We are better in terms in the following XYZ metrics, right? That means what is the key mindset of like closing bench? Simply, we will support opening, no. But what we do is simply we'll add something to the debate that we will be winning on the metrics of which. That means without what we are adding, it's like simply we can't take the debate, right? We need to understand what the entire purpose of closing benches. Sanjeev, next. Right. Yeah, the closing half is simply winning on one simple thing, that is the concept of extension. Right. What do we understand by extension? Extension is probably a new distinct contribution to the entire debate, right? When we just go ahead and build on the motion, like just beyond whatever like opening has spoken, we are just going ahead and simply giving up more and more probably just give me 1 second. Shubham, Shubham. Simply we go ahead and talk about extensions. What are these? The simple framing of closing bench is like extension. How, in terms of extensions, you are taking the debate as a closing bench. Assume that all the stakeholders, all the mechanism, all the impact layers are spoken by opening half in a for a motion, right? Now, how can you bring new extensions? Simply introduce new stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders again? Probably the people or the groups that are not deeply analyzed by the opening. Like example, in terms of like long-term effects, in terms of like marginalized categories, in terms of institutions in the very first place, right? When we talk about these long-term effects or marginalized actors, they give you sort of a huge number of points, or like speaks when you talk about them exclusively, right? That means when I come and tell you about new mechanism, how that thing works, is probably you go ahead and explain the policy is being creating on some sort of like outcome in a deeper or different way. When I talk about deeper or different way, I will tell you later in the further slide how it is. What was impact layer? Concept of new impact layer is something like on a for a like moral or structural or some sort of like cultural or like uh, consequences that are being either viewed on a basis of long term or like short term, etc., right? Like we need just had to have this keep this in your mind that extensions are not some sort of like repeating opening benches arguments. Like simply you can't go ahead and say that whatever opening half said, you are just reiterating it and you are saying that this is an exclusive extension we are providing in the debate. It's simply null and void considered by your adjudicator in the debate, right? Just you can't go ahead and say that, yeah, the new examples we provide for the motion in the debate is our some sort of like new extension. It is also invalid, right? That means you can't simply go ahead and give examples as an extension. Sanjeev, next slide. Thank you. That means what are the things that are being considered as a thing in closing speeches? Simply, you need to understand how do you structure your closing speech. You have to do it on four metrics. A, you have to brief the entire setup. How does that work? Opening told you this XYZ point. We take this debate further by showing that PQRS. That means you are entirely different, proving what opening said wrong. That means you are bringing a clear extension. That means you can't simply say one liner extension in your speech. As I mentioned, how in terms of like new mechanism you are winning this debate as a closing. That means you're one big idea can be better than many small ones. That means it's better to go ahead and push one mechanized or one impactful extension rather than just going ahead and giving thousands of one-liners as an extension, right? That means you can also go ahead and give your comparison why your extension matters more than the others. Probably your opening benches, either of the opening benches, or like even your, if you are going as the closing whip, your other house, just next corresponding house points, right? That means lastly, you have to go ahead and show why the other teams missed something important. I'll just frame it with a example, better understanding. Considering a motion, like before I go ahead, you just need to understand what closing extension looks like with some example. The motion is like this house would ban private tuition. Uh, if I go as the opening, I will simply talk about access and inequality, stress on students, rich students get ahead. So what was the closing extension could be? I can go ahead and introduce new stakeholders, new mechanism. How so? New extension I provide is impact on the teachers and education quality in the very first place. That opening bench never interacted with. That means I can go ahead and say private tuitions are pulling best teachers away from the classroom in the very first place, just because they have an incentive to teach the students in a better way, just because now they are charging the students for it. That means now schools are becoming underinvested in the very first place because tuition fills the gaps privately in the very first place. That means I am considering a long-term harm now, long-term effect of this very thing, extension, that public education is degrading in the very first place, hurting even the poorer students of the society. That means I have talked about the marginalized communities in this very marginalized, or the lower people who are under the below poverty line, people, students and all. I have talked about the institution, how public education is being considered. And yes, Anjeshta, it will be shared. Then why this is a real extension? How do I prove it? Simply, I go ahead and tell them that yeah, my actors are different. Probably like my timeline I'm proving, like in terms of like long-term system damage is being proved in my extension. Probably is not depending on any opening fairness claim in the very first place. Just a little example to have a better understanding. You need to get this motion that this house would legalize assisted dying. Assisted dying, what it means, opening can simply come ahead and say it's all about individual autonomy, it is reducing suffering and yada yada. How do you add a new impact layer to this debate? In terms of considering the new impact layer, you can simply go ahead and say how legalization changes the family dynamics in the very first place. That means you have to push the subtle pressure on elderly to not be a burden in the very first hand. That means consent is becoming morally compromised in our paradigm. In that means emotional assertion is invisible, but as well as powerful in the very first place. The judge can simply consider, even if autonomy is mattering, the social cost is making this entire policy given by the opening danger or dangerous, right? That is where CG is taking a CG or any venture CEO is taking this debate in terms of like introducing a new impact layer as an extension in the debate, right? Uh, I hope the examples are clear to everyone, right? Common mistakes which I had made in like many multiple BP comps is like I tried to cover everything. Like I pushed one-liners as my extensions. I never went ahead and decided to mechanize or prove this impact layer thingies to it. That means I was also at some point I was scared to disagree with the opening because I felt yeah whatever they said is so logically correct. I can't rebut them. I can't prove them wrong, right? That means in in my time, I simply went ahead and I gave no comparison or like these things, right? So I hope everybody's clear with the closing half. Sanjeev, can you just go to the next slide? Yeah, cool. Before I proceed with the next slide, I will simply tell you certain things that you need to sum up everything for the closing bench. You need to understand as the closing bench where the gap is lying in the opening bench's speeches, right? What is everyone ignoring in the debate? B, you have to name your extension clearly. That means one sentence you have to just put as a thesis line, which will make the judge aware of what you are pushing into the debate exclusively, which your opening bench did not even try to bring in this debate. You can just go ahead and explain the mechanism of your extension, that how does this actually happening, how the people are being actually being affected, right? That means you go ahead and compare what your point is outweighing or reframing the debate. Right. Again, speaker roles for the opening. Before that, any questions regarding the closing bench? Anyone? Open to questions. Cool. Seeing none, proceeding with the speaker role. Smith, opening bench, please. Thank you so much.
You can unmute and ask, I guess.
Yeah, Bhaiya, just a quick question. Like you explained what is an extension, so can you give us an example? I really didn't understand your point.
Oh, cool.
What
I will.
extension are part?
Okay, cool. I will tell you an example. I just told about this example in my previous, like example wala part, that this house would legalize assisted dying. I hope you understand the concept of assisted dying. That means you have to go ahead and talk about, assuming that I am the opening, what I, as the opening, could have spoken about. I would have spoken about individual autonomy or like reducing the suffering or things as a government in like for legalizing the assisted dying, right? That means what, as a closing extension, like closing bench, I could have brought an extension when the major points of like probably autonomy and like suffering is being covered up by the opening government. So what is left? What am I left with as a closing bench? What are the extensions? Simply, I can go ahead and bring a new impact layer. When you talk about extensions as a closing bench, you can categorize it on the metrics of like how you are different in metrics of like probably like how you're introducing new stakeholders or like new mechanism or like new impact layer firstly, right? That means I can just go ahead and tell you that, yeah, this extension is that how legalization is changing the entire family dynamics. That means subtle pressure on elderly people that they are not as considered to be as a burden now. Their consent is becoming morally compromised, but emotional suasion is invisible as well as powerful. So this is how an extension looks like. You have to be clear what your extension is, how you are different, what new thing you are bringing into the debate, right? The in terms of like new creating a new impact layer or some sort of like giving a new mechanism or some sort of like bringing new stakeholders who are majorly affected, but the opening half might have missed it by in their speeches, right? I hope that answers your question, Harsh.
Yeah, it kind of did, but just one more thing. You said that we don't really have to cover each and everything. Like you don't have to talk about every point. But for
No, no,
this
no.
extension part,
You don't
yeah,
have to speak
for
about.
uh
Go ahead.
yeah, no, but you said in this extension part that you have to bring the impact of what is not being already told in the opening statement. So like how both of these are not conflicting each other.
Oh, cool. You have to understand. There is an exclusivity. That means I told you that one extension which you are able to provide in terms of good mechanism, like good stakeholder impact or good anything, you just go ahead and push that one single point. You know that the opening did not speak about this or stuff. You can simply go ahead and talk about it. You don't have to cover up everything around. Like, अगर तुम्हारे पास 10 points है, you don't have to go ahead and discuss all the 10 points. You just pick one point which is more impactful to the debate, which can bring fruitful matter argument in your paradigm. Simply, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Any question? Seeing none. Uh, Smith, you can continue with your opening when speaker rules. Sanjeev, thank you, Sanjeev. Okay. You need to understand what those two speaker roles look like as the first speaker of a debate in a close in the opening half. First speaker is Prime Minister. Again, Prime Minister roles are quite simple. It's same as like our in an Asian parliamentary debate, right? I hope everyone is here is aware of what speaker or like prime minister or leader of opposition burdens are. I'll simply go ahead and reiterate what are the roles look like. You understand prime minister again. They set up the stance or the context or the definition for the debate, outlines the policy or model, provides arguments in favor of the motion. Personally, as a prime minister or the first speaker, how I structure my speech is simply I just pick out the keywords of the debate, I define them, I set up the world, try to characterize them along with my stakeholders, giving a impact, and lastly, I try to put points of arguments which are probably like related with characterized or the world I have brought into. Similarly, leader of opposition simply go ahead and will be setting up the clash counter policy. That means as the prime minister can go ahead and give a policy which the leader of the opposition can simply counter fact, and they say that this whatever policy given by the prime minister is false. This is our policy as the opening bench, right? Opposition bench. Right. That means the leader of opposition has to revert whatever prime minister said, and now they have to go ahead and build again their side of the world, their new probably like if a counter policy if they needed, accepting or rejecting the definitions given by the prime minister or context of prime minister, whatever if necessary, reverting the arguments. I prefer not spend much longer period of time to like revert your prime minister rather than to focus on your side of points of arguments. Next slide, please, Sanjeev. Thank you. Considering the second speaker of both the benches, Deputy Prime Minister, OG second speaker, what this looks like simply now, the burden of Deputy Prime Minister is a bit like difficult. Why so? Because now you are the last speaker of your bench. Your burden is to like you are the last speaker who can probably like make your side heavy in the very first place. Right? What your goals look like? We'll simply go ahead and rebut the arguments of the previous speaker, probably like the leader of opposition. You are rebuilding the arguments of your prime minister. You are providing additional arguments. You are dealing with the definitional challenges if only necessary. That means you can simply go ahead and tell new points of arguments like new arguments like some sort of like if whatever your prime minister couldn't complete in their speech you can bring examples in it, and that's what your DPM rules ends with. Then coming to DLO, DLO is the last speaker of the opening bench, simply again last speaker of opening opposition as well. That means the role of DLO is also a very difficult role, like some sort of like burden when like considered in terms of like proving your bench to be heavy just because you are now the last speaker. That means you can just rebut the arguments of your previous speaker, probably like DPM. You can just go ahead and overall rebut the prime minister, deputy prime minister, and prime minister as well. You can rebuild the arguments of your LO. You can provide additional arguments and things. You can bring examples. You can make your points of arguments better and better from your LO. Right. With that, next slide, please. Yeah, cool. Just give me 1 minute. Huh. Okay. Coming to the closing bench speakers, right? Again, closing bench members are a little bit tricky now because there is a new member, new speaker role introduced to you all. That is member. That is, we have two members, like probably the member of closing government, member of closing opposition. Considering first as a member of closing government, a member role. Now, what is my identity as a member? I simply am the extension speaker. What does this mean? That means I'm bringing new idea that is justifying my team's existence. That means member of government will simply go ahead and prove in what terms they are exclusive, like the CG is exclusive in the ambit of debate, right? That means my core job is to introduce and fully explain the extension I am providing, which is exclusive extension I'm providing into the debate, right? What my speech as a member look like? It simply must have been having contextualization. What does that mean? That means you can go ahead and say opening focus on X, we extend by analyzing Y. That means you are bringing a new extension which is unique or exclusive in your paradigm, and you are now analyzing it, you are fleshing it out in the very first place, right? That means two, you can go ahead and provide clear extensions. How does this clear extension looks like? That means I mentioned again, and even Arsh asked That means one strong and distinct contribution you have to make in the entire debate that will make the judge feel that, yeah, whatever this member has said is very much significant for this very specific debate, right? That means now you have to do in term better in terms of mechanism. Like you have to prove step by step how the impact is working in your paradigm. That means how this initial comparison is drawn in the very first place, right? That means you have to prove why your side of extension is mattering more than what's already on the table, right? That means what, as the member, you should not do. You should not just rebuild opening cases, right? That means you cannot go ahead and reiterate whatever opening said. That is not even considered as an exclusive material in your side. That means you have to just be exclusive, and you have to also be burden fulfiller, and you have to also be clearer while proving that extension to the judge, right? That means you should not probably like run multiple cases. Run one case, right? Run one extension and try to be clear with that extension, make it more impactful, make the stakeholders being highlighted, how they are being affected on the terms of long term institutions and etc etc, right? That means you have to keep in mind as an MG or like MC or like member of government or closing government or closing opposition, if your extension is failing, your team is failing as well. That means also I have written this very good thing that the mess I made in a very recent comp, Sanjeev knows about it. That means as a member, you can give any extension, but you have to prove it in a nice way just to make your team win. So you are the vital speaker of a closing government or closing opposition as a member. Sanjeev, next slide, please. Thank you. Second speaker of the closing bench, that is government whip or the opposition whip. Roles remain constant as an APD whip, right? But still, I will just reiterate. What is your identity? Simply, you are the narrator or the judge translator now. That means you are like probably that not doing any sort of new constructive arguments, right? Your core job is lying around, show why my team is going ahead and deserving to be ranked higher than the others in the very first place. That means if you are simply the CE, your burden is to go ahead and your burden is simply go ahead and probably like introduce a new reiterate whatever the first speaker has spoken about, right? What your speech must satisfy. A, you can just frame the debate entirely, your member and your probably like your the first speaker has spoken about, right? That means you have to frame the debate what this debate is really about. You have to crystallize your clashes in the very first hand. You have to go ahead and pick two or three big questions that will be deciding the round. That means you cannot introduce new material to the debate. Instead, what you could do is simply go ahead and prove your first speaker's points that important, right? That means you have to compare teams, why your extension is beating like your opening on your side or like both the teams on the other side. That means you can simply go ahead and rebut every other houses, every other speaker in like it's better. What I prefer is simply going ahead and challenging the premises, rather than going individual speaker wise rebuttal. Right. That means you are going ahead and weighing the impacts. That is like depth over breadth. I have mentioned this in the first part of like when I told you about the closing benches. This is a verbatim of one of my seniors, one of the president of Chronicle, that is Bakshi Bhaiya. Bakshi Bhaiya always tells that depth is always being over like breadth. That means it is better to probably like give a more deeper like extension, that you choose one extension, pick up one extension and simply flesh it out in terms of like new impactful stakeholders, new impactful layers, new impactful institutions and yada yada, right? That means you cannot just be speaker as a speaker, you cannot go ahead and introduce 10 different points as a one liner in the very first place, right? What you should never do as a web, simply you cannot add new analysis, right? That means you cannot re-explain the extension in detail because you are running out of time. You have to rebut your other speakers, you have to just summarize what your first speaker has spoken. You have to probably like do a lot of job, right? That means you are the one who is deciding what your house's bench is deserving as a rank, right? You cannot panic and summarize everything. That will be again a mess up. It creates a lot of mess up. Uh, Next slide. I guess Sanjeev. Next slide. Huh. Uh, okay. I will just gonna take the POI slide as well. Right. What is the point of information in a British parliamentary debate? It's the concept of point of information or a POI remains same as an APD, but there is a slight difference. What does it mean? Like The definition is given the scope of opponent debaters to formally interject in the speech of current speaker. A POI could be question, call out, a clarification, or a rebuttal as long as it fits within a 15 seconds limit. Okay, so how is it different in BPs? In BPs, POIs can flip the cases in one go. That means you can simply go ahead as a opening bench and you can question your closing bench that whatever you said is flawed. Can you just explain me XYZ point in your speech? That means the closing might be get panicked in the moment, like whatever they did not expect to come in this debate in the very first place. Right? That means you are again the basic rules of PY only the within the first and last minute of the except the first and last minute of the debate you can just ask your PY anytime if mentioned by the speaker you can be respecting you must be respecting the preference POI preferences, right? That means it is recommended that teams take at least one POI to encourage because in BPs it matters a lot. A POI can increase your speeds, it can flip your case and etc. Again 15 seconds length of POIs and stuff. Okay, so what happens in BPs as a POI? That means there's a concept of engaging diagonally, right? When I go as the prime minister, I can simply go ahead and tell her that my POI preferences are after the fifth minute, and preferably I will take one POI from the closing bench, that is closing opposition. That means you can, the first house that is being preferred for OG, who can ask, like, assume that there are four teams, right? OG has POIs from all the three benches. Like probably O has raised their hands, CG has raised their hand, CO has raised their hand. What happens is simply the first preference that OG has to take in consideration of like POI in terms of POI will be CO. That is the diagonal method is being followed. For similarly as like OO, CG will be preferred first. I hope everyone is clear with the point of information point. Sanjeev, next slide. Oh, cool. I hope I'm done with the speaker burdens. I am done with the closing bench burdens. I'm done with the POI. Any questions regarding that? Anyone? Open to questions now.
Bhaiya, if the government has not built his world very well, and I am
Bolo?
I am the emoji, then do I not have to rebuild his world even if he has not explained it well?
Yeah, that is where your extension is about, right? You can simply go ahead and tell that in the world which I'm going to draw my extension, probably like if you opening bench never gives an extension about media and they never explain to me that how this media looks like. You as a member of government, you can simply go ahead and explain what media looks like, then bring an exclusive point. Right. That is where your speaks and judge credibility is increasing in the very first place. Right.
So it will inherently become rebuilding only, with a
No,
forgiving
that
hand.
is where your world building is getting better, right? That means you can simply, we have not talked about at all media, how media looks like, how the things look like. You're going ahead and talking about the media from a new, like probably from you're starting from ABCD of media, right? That is how your extension becoming exclusive and more impactful. Now you have, since you have explained about media, you can simply go ahead and explain your long-term effects on the stakeholders. You can simply go ahead and explain about your probably like your new impact layer that you are trying to create, right?
Okay, thank you. And another one I have,
Hanji, bolo.
like government web, he will be explaining the points of the emoji or the PM.
Oh, again, government whip has no link like with the opening benches. His only friend is emoji. Emoji and government whip are best friends, and anyone above like other houses are their enemies, right? So he has no
Okay,
link to support any other houses. He can simply go ahead and rebut the other houses speakers.
last one. What is rebuttal in POI?
Oh, POIs में rebuttal नहीं होता. It's something else. It's like rebuttals are different thing. POIs are different things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hello everyone. Just let me know, like react to whatever it is. That can you hear me very clearly? At any point of time, if you cannot hear me, just feel free to unmute and let me know. Okay, you raised your hand for Bhagav. Did you want to say anything?
Sorry, sorry.
Okay, got it, got it. So, okay, I hope it's clear that in a BP there's four branches, right? There's OG, there's OO, there's CG, and there's CO. And we're just gonna refer to them as these two letters each because I think it's simply easier. Instead of मैं तुम्हें हर बार बताती रहूँगी things like this is opening government, opening opposition, etc. Now, can you move to the next slide, Sanjeev? Okay, so first off, before beginning with the opening government or the opening opposition, what I need you to understand is two basic things that you cannot do, or simply if you're going to go ahead and do it, you need to give me proper information on how. Right. Two major things that people go ahead and skip is squirreling and vague definitions. This is very simple and clear, right? What is squirreling? Just a bad definition. See, what does this actually look like? If you get a motion, for example, say, oh, we should do all of this, or like we should go into all competitions, right? For example, if I go ahead and tell you, motion is we should go into all competitions, and if the OG comes up and say, oh, we should go into some competitions, that is exactly what a bad definition looks like, because you're breaking the entire definition and molding it according to yourself, just to make your job easier. You are not allowed to do that in a meeting. You are definitely not allowed to do it, and you have completely gone for if you go if some, the entire opposition just hears it and calls you out ki, hey, you did not even listen to the entire motion, you need to take it down, instead you just went wrong. That's completely not in the ambit of the debate, right? That is when you go wrong. What you're not allowed to do is squirreling. One, that's complete cheating. Second, what you're not allowed to do is probably vague definitions. What are vague definitions? They're just weak. They're still allowed to some extent. Vague definitions are like, okay, if I go ahead and tell you that the motion is, say example, we will ban this. But if they go ahead and say, though, we will ban it to some extent or something like that. But you have to understand a ban is a ban. That means this needs to be completely stopped. You can't go ahead and tell me that, oh, you will ban it till 90% and the entire 10% is left, right? That is very vague. You don't actually tell me that, oh, this is legal, illegal, etc. This is just too weak. Then that is very hard for the judge to go ahead and buy into your entire frame, whatever you're trying to set, right? These two things are normally mistakes that O or OG makes, and that is something that both of the benches should not go ahead and make, and I would just say closings shouldn't either. But the thing is, closings barely go ahead and make these frames in the very first place until and unless your OG and O are very very bad. I don't expect you to go ahead and make that, right. That is something that the Aj will go ahead and explain to you further, and I think it'll be a lot more clear in entirety Ananya's part. Right. When we go ahead and talk about OG, you need to understand why are they called the builders. Simple. Main job is you have to start the entire story. Think of it like people who build the entire frame first, who build the entire house first. What do you have to for sure give to me, right? You must come up and explain what the entire motion means, right? Simple and fair definitions. By fair definitions, I mean fair definitions, not vague definitions, not squirreling. Now you go ahead and tell me how the entire world changes if the motion happens, like the entire model or mechanism or whatever the framework that you're trying to push forward. For example, if I go ahead and give you this motion that it's a motion that I would love, right? Okay, so this house would simply go ahead and give every student free ice cream. You go ahead and tell me as OG who gets this ice cream, how is it accessible to everyone, when does this happen, why does it actually make kids happier, healthier, whatever you want to push forward, that's up to debate. And if OG does not go ahead and explain this clearly, this is what's going to happen to the entire three of the benches. They're going to either get confused, they're going to redefine everything that you go ahead and say. So your first speaker is basically gone for PM speech does not get credited. This is just about building base arguments, right? Now, what does your DPM do? That's already fairly explained by the Becca and Smith itself, that you have to go ahead and push extensions, you have to just probably go ahead and contest to the entire O points as well. Now, when we go ahead and talk about more, give main reasons why the entire motion is good. You have to actually constantly talk about why your frame actually stands, right? You have to constantly give them the main reasoning or major reasoning that yes, this is how it happens, what happens, why it happens, how is it actually connected to the entire debate, and why is it so important, because it's completely tied back. Right? This is a core role. You set up the entire debate world. And if you do it well, I think that is one of the major reasons where OG gets to go ahead and take the debate if you build the proper foundation completely. So these are your mandatory burdens, right? You have to give me clear framing, interpretation. You have to tell me that what counts as this, what does it not count as. And if it's a policy motion, or if it's like how the entire policy thing, I think that's a bit harder to do as the opening benches, simply for me as well, because you have to explain the entire policy to me. Who does what? How does it look like? What changes in the behavior
behavior comes in. What is the reason behind all of this? If it did not happen, what would be there? If it goes ahead and happens, what would be the difference in the entire thing? So once you give me the entire main framing and tell me what matters in this entire debate, that is how you take it as the OG. That is your main burden. Right. Moving on to the next slide. Sanjeev, next slide. Okay, now we get on to OO. What does it mean? They're the first challengers. Simply because as soon as OG ends, OO is the main person who goes ahead and breaks the OG's case, right? So there's three options you can do. You can either make or break the case. You can go ahead and engage and tell them that yes, even if that does happen, if there's a probability of this actually happening from the OG's name, what do I actually go ahead and push? How is my word simply better? You directly respond to OG's arguments because most of the times OO has to go ahead and engage, right? If you go ahead and just push whatever you want from the OO side, yes, your points, if they're good, the definition clashes, etc., if your constructives are very, very good, they would be credited. But you have to constantly respond to the OG's argument as well. Because there's no proper engagement, or if you're not actually going ahead and being even the littlest of bit of a charitable person and trying to engage with the entire case, that is not something the ads can go ahead and understand, right? You have to tell me that yes, what is your response to maybe OG pushing three different metrics? Why do those metrics not stand for you? What is the entire probability of this, whatever they're trying to push forward, does not happen, right? You show me why the OG's world is completely worse, or how is yours bad but still theirs is worse, right? So that is also called something known as trade-off. And if this trade-off happens in any of these two benches, I'm referring to as both of the benches, right? There's gov bench, off bench, opening bench, closing bench. So if you go ahead and take a trade-off from the gov bench or the off bench, explaining it in a simpler way, what is the trade-off? Trade-off is like, okay, if I am gov and you're op, you're telling me this harm happens. I go ahead and tell you that yes, even if this harm happens to some extent, there is greater harm on your side. So I'm fine with this harm happening on my side as long as the greater harm on yours does not exist. Simply, what does it mean? If they go ahead and say to me that on the gov side, 10 people are dying, if I go ahead and prove that 100 people are dying on your side, that is a trade-off that I'm ready to take. That at the end of the day, 10 people are dying on my side, 100 are dying on yours, so yours is simply worse, right? That is how you go ahead and directly respond. Either give a trade-off, you respond or contest to the entire argument and prove why it doesn't work, or that is just simple things that you can go ahead and do as the opposition or the government both. Now, after you go ahead and give this entire word comparison, you can go ahead and tell me that why is your alternative better. See, if it's a policy or if it's like other should motions, what are you supposed to do as the OO if the OG has already given a policy? What do you go ahead and do? You give a different framework. If also multiple times called a counterfactual. What does this counterfactual look like? If they go ahead and tell you that, oh, we're going to build roads here, 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 you can go ahead and push a counterfactual that yes, we will also build roads, but we would also focus on something like other infrastructures, right? That is something that you go ahead and push as a counterfactual, but it still goes ahead and carries the basic burdens of a policy motion as well, right? So something that we have talked about throughout the entire three speakers of us, like Smith, Deva, and me, we go ahead and tell you that yes, even if you give this entire counterfactual, you still follow the basic rules that yes, you have to tell me why this policy works, what does it look like, who gets affected, who doesn't, who implements it, what is this entire implementation looking like. That is something you have to constantly push for if you're telling me that you have an alternative, right? You can't just tell me that no, this is not going to work. You just have to give me a proper reasoning on why it's not going to happen. Simple. I hope that's fair enough. Moving on to the next thing. Right. Closing benches are very, very fun to do. Note that closing benches also help you a lot because you don't have to constantly write from the very beginning, and that is why I love closing benches. Now, coming to CG. CG is called the extenders simply because they add a new layer, right? They bring a new argument, a new layer that just makes the entire government case deeper. Now, something that a person already asked about a doubt for, yes, if the OG or the OO does not actually bring out a proper frame that you think should have been there from the opposition or the gov's case, you can do that in your speech. That is basically something that you would be credited for. That, oh, this is an extension or this is a new frame that should have existed from the opening benches itself, but you're bringing it in closing because you thought that this is missing and this is something that is very, very important to the debate, but you'll have to go ahead and prove it in debate. As soon as you bring a new idea or angle that is called an extension, which is already explained very well from the America, thank you, you then go ahead and show something that the OG did not talk about. This is called proving how you're not a derivative of your opening bench. Even if it's opposition, even if it's government, you prove it to me that yes, I am not a derivative of my opening bench simply because yes, they missed out on this. This is how my frame is better. or this is something that they completely missed, or this argument also is very, very important to the debate, and this is something that cannot be missed, right? You give me a clear extension. It's either a new argument, maybe like you give me more extensions on how you analyze the entire stakeholder, or maybe a stakeholder that they missed. You give me a new mechanism, how this could be done better. You give me a new framing. But one thing you cannot do is completely throw away your opening case or go ahead and knife it, right? That is not going to be helpful in whatsoever situation, right? So, for example, if I go ahead and if there's a motion about mental health, if OG talks about the entire mental health scenario, as CG, you can go ahead and talk about the entire algorithm actually working out that, oh, maybe it causes political radicalization of minors, maybe it protects some sort of democratic literacy, etc., etc. Because that is new, something that you can bring to the table. And if you feel okay, they pushed one liners, but it could be explained better, you can go ahead and note that down as well. Because simply that will be credited to you better if you're going to go ahead and mechanize it better for me. Because simply your opening bench could not. Now, that is simple, and that is how you exactly make your team look different and valuable, because now you are the closing, you have new material, and as well as that, you go ahead and whenever your whip comes in closing, you can go ahead and refute the entire case as well as constantly tie it back to the entire case. That is very important. Please note, you have to constantly tie it back that yes, this is something that has already been said, this is how the entire implementation looks like, and that is how I tie it back to the entire debate, and I ensure that my stakeholders at the end of the day are way happier in my world, so you cannot win. And this is why we take the debate. Right? Moving on to the next slide. Closing opposition. Now, there are the final people, the final crushers. What do they go ahead and do? You have to bring the strongest final opposition angle plus weigh everything. That is where weighing comes in, right? One, you have to simply do the same thing that the member of Gov also does. Add a new opposition extension. Could be anything that I explained. It could be a flip. It could be a different mechanism, new angle, new frame, new stakeholder that everyone else missed. That is completely on you how you entire flip the entire debate towards your side. One, that is something that both of the member of opposition has to do. Second, you have to go ahead and compare all teams and explain why opposition wins overall, right? That is something you can do simply. It's up to you if you want to go ahead and push out your OO first, or you want to push out the entire gov bench first. That's up to you. Whatever structure you want to follow. Personally, I normally go ahead and why I am better than the open bench or I'm better than the closing bench, and then go ahead to the other bench. Depends on whatever the motion is, whatever you're comfortable with. Now, when you go ahead and compare all the things and explain, you have to constantly note it down and explain it to them and weigh out how your arguments look like and why are they simply better. You can do this by different analysis that obviously would be talked about throughout the entire workshop itself. That you can like tell me that yes, if I weigh out these two arguments, that this is a clash, and if I tell you how this implementation looks like, if I give you a proper analysis that yes, this is the probability of this happening, why it would happen, how it would happen, how is it so much more important, what is this going to look like, and then I do it for both of the sides, and I tell you why is mine so much more tied back, why is mine making so much more sense than the other side. That is how I go ahead and give a proper weighing to every single argument that's on the table. Right? That is how you go ahead and win as a CEO. Next, what do? You have to do very strong weighing, yes. Like what are the impacts, positive impacts, what are the net benefits, net negatives, etc. That depends on every single motion, and that is exactly how you draw clear extinction from every single bench, right? You have to explain to me what are the proper exclusive benefits or exclusive harms that you're pushing on the other sides. Also note, if you are any of the opening benches, you also have to constantly go ahead and push harms to the other benches as well, right? That is something that works very well simply because when you're OO, you're pushing harms to the CG. When you're CG, you're pushing harms to the entire op bench as well. Because you simply know that the only bench that comes after you is closing or whatever it is. You know the entire work, right? It's OG, OO, CG, CO. That is how you constantly go ahead and refute as well as constantly talk about how your entire extension or everything else is symmetric, right? Symmetric or similar or better simply. Now, also note that these whip parts are similar. Like even in APD, you're not allowed to go ahead and give me new arguments. It's the same thing in BPD, right? That is something that you cannot think that yes, maybe it's a BPD since we're like just two people, we're allowed to go ahead and bring new arguments. No, you're not allowed to do that. It's the same thing as APD, and you'll have to continue forward the same way. So that is how the entire thing works for all four benches. I hope it's clear, and if there's any questions, please ask. Great. If there's no other questions, and if there are any questions that arise later on, you're allowed to go ahead and text me anytime you want to. Passing over to Ananya, she will do lovely. in the BP adjudication. Just hear her very clearly. That's for all adjudicators as well as speakers, because you will understand how she goes ahead and marks everything, right? Right. Over to you, Ananya.
Hello, hello, just give me 1 second. Hi, yes, am I audible? Well, all right, great. Thank you so much. I know everyone is very tired, but this is like very important both for speakers as well as adjudicators, right? Because speakers, you need to know how you're being judged, right? And adjudicators, well, we need to know how you need to judge a debate. So I think this is important for everyone in general. So just please try to hold your attention for like 20 minutes. That's all I'll take. Okay. Next slide, please, Sanjeev. Alright, how do you judge a BPD in general, or how you're judged in a BPD in general, is simply, you know, the judges basically get convinced by you if you're very, very persuasive with your arguments, or you're very, very persuasive with whatever your burdens are. I think that's very, very clear for whatever your burdens are. That is like motion burdens, or there are, speaker roles or speaker burdens that need to be fulfilled. If you're very, very persuasive in that, you're actually going to win a debate in general, in PPDs or in APDs, everything in general. But there are a lot of technicalities to just being persuasive. Now, anyone can go ahead and be persuasive about anything. You need to be legitimately persuasive. What does being legitimately persuasive mean, right? That is attempting to prove within the constraints set by the rules of BP debating, right? What do these constraints look like have already been covered by Devagya and I3, right? That is like maybe not maybe as closing, you're not going to contradict your opening half. That is like one constraint. You cannot go ahead and put forward two claims that are mutually exclusive from your opening bench or from your other speaker. I'll be covering contradictions later, that's a completely different thing. Or it's like you being as the whip speaker going ahead and putting some new argument that is not allowed. So you have to be legitimately persuasive. You have to be persuasive within the ambit of whatever rules that have been set for debating in general. So that is it. Now, judges judge your debates as an ordinary intelligent voter. That is, judges, if you are judging a debate, you must judge a debate as an ordinary intelligent voter. Now, that's someone who has broad rather than deep knowledge, meaning they're informed about relevant facts but do not have specialized knowledge about it. For example, let's say there's a scientific revolution about something, right? Now, the average intelligent voter, if that scientific discovery actually makes it to international headlines or is very, very popular, then that average intelligent voter will be aware of the discovery that has happened. However, they're not expected to know all the scientific backing, all the technicalities behind the research in general. They're only supposed to know that this particular thing has happened. Now, this, however, does not mean that you cannot bring technicality to support your arguments in general, right? What does that mean is that you just have to mechanize them well enough for your you just have to, go ahead and mechanize your technicalities well enough that the judge can go ahead and, agree on the likelihood of your technicality existing in the very first place. And note, judges, that if a technical argument is mechanized well enough, then you have to suppose, then you have to like go ahead and believe in it, unless like circumstances arise wherein the other opposing team goes ahead and counters that mechanization satisfiably well, and then you cannot credit that. However, technicality is very much allowed. You can go ahead and be as technical as you want, as long as you are, explaining how that entire technicality is going to work, and you're actually, proving how that holds within all sorts of plausible circumstances that may arise. Now, what is an ordinary intelligent voter? These are just like basic sentences. That is like an ordinary intelligent voter voters should be aware of the basic facts about the world. That is, let's say, media headlines or news headlines that are made that have been popular recently. Current affairs that are going on, some past historical institutions or some past happenings that might have happened, which are very, very popular and very, very relevant in international relations, etc. You're not supposed to know the technicalities of it. You're not supposed to know a lot about it, but you're only supposed to know that these things exist. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Again, you should also avoid using your personal knowledge if you have of the topic. That is, let's say you have there's a certain argument and you have a certain bias towards it or whatever. You have a particular opinion. When you're an ordinarily intelligent voter, right, you have to keep aside all your biases. You have to keep aside all your notions, all your understanding of the topic, and judge the debate as completely, completely normal, as if it is being presented to you. The entire topic is being presented to you for the very first time, and all you know about it is that very fact simply existing in the world. You have to, go ahead and then give very little credit that appeals merely to emotion or authority. Anything that is an emotional appeal is simply not credited. Anything that you credit must be mechanized, must be weighed out extremely well for it to hold relevance, right? Now, you also need to ignore all, all sorts of biases, all sort of backgrounds, all sort of, maybe intuitions or inferences that you might be having regarding certain arguments, right? You also need to avoid preferencing any sort of styles or any sort of types of accents or like way of speaking that you prefer in general, because everyone has a preferred way of speaking. But you need to keep all of that aside and judge as an ordinary intelligent voter someone who is being presented with those facts for the very first time, and you know that these things exist but you do not know the very technicalities of it. Now when you do that, the debate becomes very clear to you. If you like empty off your mind and you listen to the arguments one by one, keeping all your biases aside, then you can go ahead and actually judge your debate as normal, because then it will be very easy for you to go ahead and then compare people's arguments in general. Yeah, that is pretty much it for judging as an ordinary intelligent voter. If you have any questions still now, please feel free to ask. If it's all good, please react with a thumbs up, whatever. Okay, I agree.
Anya, could you just check text once, like, and then I'll just get a heads up on when to continue for the next thing.
Uh, I
Just
can't
check
see your
this.
text.
Just check my text once, no? Just 1 second.
Team has any other questions? Okay, there's something that I3 wants to announce. I3, please announce that.
Alright, hello everyone. I am sure that everyone's here. I don't see a lot of people, but still. Biggest thing that we need to actually talk about is all of you not replying to things which are on the official group. Right. There are two big announcements which have been constantly like talked about. मैंने लिखा है, स्मिथ ने लिखा है. You guys need to understand that we've constantly talked about WDS, which is the Winter Debate Symposium 2026. It's one of the biggest debate tournaments that happen throughout the entire year. There's one summer, one winter. So you understand the seriousness of it. Next, that's a big comp. Next, we have NIT Durgapur, which is another APD, and it's online. It's not offline. It was supposed to be offline. Got shifted to online. I need to know why are not most of you either responding, not participating, and actually not like showing up, because I've only seen, like, since I dropped like 6 texts, I've only seen 3 people reach out to me for WDS as well as NITD. We do not have many meetings either. So I understand if you're in a debating society, you have to debate, right? That's the entire point of being in a debating society. Like, we don't care how bad you are, because we are here to actually take these sessions and make you better. So please, I need people to raise their hands if they're actually interested. Because this is the last call. We have to register tonight itself, because there's the comp tomorrow as well as the day after tomorrow. So I need you to like tell me right away if you're interested in any of them, because you can go ahead and register today itself. We need to get this done by tonight. So anyone else except for Anjisa, I need to know right now, please.
I
Because
have a doubt.
go ahead, ask Sympathy.
For NIT Durgapur, what is the timing for the tournament?
We will share a schedule since it's tomorrow and day after tomorrow. I think there's only 4 rounds, and each round is like 2 hours. So even if you go ahead and do that, that tomorrow will be day one. So check-ins start almost at like 8:30 9 a.m. and your rounds start from 10 something. Right.
Yeah,
So
so actually, my team from Gambit, we was thinking about participating,
that's
but
right.
all have engagements tomorrow, but we are free on Sunday. And we were worried about the timings. So
Thing
if
is, wait, just give me 1 second. I can go ahead and get the calendar for you. Like, we have proper, like, there'll be two pictures that I'll send over to you right now. Just let me know. So, you and your team, right, Sanskriti? Can you drop me a text on my number? Like, you find my name anywhere over there. Can you send me a text with three of your members' names? I can go ahead and send you the entire brochure, like, which includes the timings of all of the rounds. Okay, Anjishta, you raise your hand. Tell me, what are you interested in?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm my participation in the winter symposium.
Oh, you texted me about it, right?
Yeah.
You're interested
But
in
I
answering.
don't have a roommate.
Oh, you don't have a teammate.
Sorry, teammate. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's completely fine. So, what I was asking is, see, if you're a new recruit, right? So, what are you more like interested or comfortable in debating, like BP or AP? Abhi.
Actually, I am interested in both the formats, but I just wanted to kickstart, so I thought like let's start with BP.
Okay, the thing
I
is,
I
BPs
don't
are
have.
generally harder than APs. So, would you be interested in doing an AP if I go ahead and find teammates for you
Uh, all
and make
right.
you the
I
welcome? Would that be good?
yeah yeah that would be excellent. I just want to start my journey. I just didn't know how, so
Oh, that's
I just
perfect.
like.
That's very nice.
Just a second. Yes. Next slide, please, Sanjeev. Great. Now, what's persuasiveness? Now, I told you, right, that whenever you're basically judging a debate, right, you're being judged on whether you're persuasive with whatever arguments that you're putting forward, right? Now, what is persuasiveness in general? The persuasiveness of an argument in British parliamentary debating is rooted in the plausible reasons, the reasoning, etc., that are offered to show that it is true and important. Now, this is what we call analysis in general, right? Going ahead and providing reasons in support of an argument that you put forward. And other than that, the clarity and the rhetorical power with which these reasons are explained, which is again what we call style or what we call manner, right? Now, what do we mean by analysis? Analysis is simply reasons that you offer in support of an argument, proving why an argument is certainly going to hold in all plausible scenarios. That is, maybe mechanizing it well enough, giving sufficient, reasons to the same, in which you can go ahead and then tell me that your argument is going to hold true in whatever may come, right? Other than that, this like includes any evidence that you might have, any examples of that sort. However, understand that examples are not very important. They're just like good support that you can provide with your arguments in general. Any sort of mechanisms that can come in for the same, any sort of reasons that go ahead and proves your argument is simply what analysis is. Now, what do we mean by style? Style is conveying your reasons effectively. Now, by style, we obviously do not mean any sort of accents, any tones that you might prefer, because I understand everyone has their, preferences of accents, preferences of tones, preferences of manners of speaking that you really like to listen or sits with you better. But that is not something that you're judged on. By style, I mean conveying your reasons effectively, conveying your reasons with clarity, conveying your reasons with rhetorical power. If you're able to convince the adjudicator, if you're able to convince the people who are judging you that whatever you're saying is actually true, is actually going to hold, so that is something that comes in with style. So analysis and style are two very important things that go hand in hand. When you tell me about the plausible reasons of some sort of argument, you have to do that with a lot of clarity so that the judge can actually go ahead and understand whatever you're trying to convey. That is all that is for persuasiveness and analysis and style. Next slide, please. Contradictions. Now, yeah, this is very important. I think a lot of it has already been covered by Devagya, and I agree. However, what is a contradiction, right? A contradiction is, explicitly stating and taking a position opposite to the one that is already made by your side. Like, this also means that you're not supposed to contradict your side in the opening half as well. That is, for example, you're the closing bench, right? Now, your opening half has gone ahead with some line of argumentation. For example, you're the closing opposition, and your opening opposition has gone ahead with some sort of argumentation. You're supposed to extend on that. I think Devagya made it very clear what is extension. You're supposed to extend on that. You're not going to contradict whatever they have said. So that is what we mean by contradictions, right? So in case this happens, in case a contradiction actually happens, what happens then is that only the first claim, that is maybe the claim from the opening half, if the closing half opposes it or contradicts it. So the first claim that is made about a particular subject, about a particular topic, is the claim that will be credited, and the other claim, the second claim or the contradicting claim, will not be credited because that is simply unfair to the other teams. So the other team or the opposing team is not expected to argue debate or give argumentation for both the arguments that have been put forward by the other team. They're only supposed to engage with the first line of argumentation that was put forward. Now, what if you are the opposing team? What do you do if your opposing team actually goes ahead and contradicts themselves? Worrying is not an option. Now, you do not need to engage with both their claims. Just engage with their first one. Call it out. Call out the contradiction. It is good practice. It helps give your judge much more clarity in case they miss it. So try to make the case or try to make your debate very very clear to the judge. So if you see that the other house is contradicting themselves, go ahead, point it out, and the judge will specially make note of it. So yeah, that's all for contradictions. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, this is something that is very, very important in British parliamentary debating, and this is something that actually distinguishes it a lot from Asian parliamentary debates in general. Now, when judges actually go ahead and assess your argumentations, right? They assess it on the basis of like a flow chart or whatever. There are certain steps. There are certain steps that they take. Now, what do judges do, right? Judges firstly adjudicate on a particular sort of criteria that is implicit with the sort of debate there is. Now, if there is one criteria, then the judges basically go ahead and judge the entire debate on that particular criteria. Now, if there is one particular criteria or principle that all the teams implicitly agree on, or they agree that it is important, or if there is another one criteria which in one round has success which one team in one round has successfully proven to be true and important, if they have proven it to be true, then that has to be credited to that team, right? If there's like no specific implicit or explicit fleshing out a criteria on which the entire debate should be weighed on, right, then we simply judge it on the basis of what an ordinary intelligent voter would consider to be true, and whatever that criteria is simply what we judge the debate on. Now, what that means is, suppose a debate happens, there are like what we call as clashes. There are certain criteria that are going to build up. There are certain things that are going to be talked about again and again. People will try to prove that this particular criteria is actually being fulfilled, or this particular line of argumentation is something that is going to hold in their world. When this is something that happens, it's actually a fruitful debate, and in that particular case, you go ahead and then weigh the number of criteria that come along, right? Now, one debate can have more than one criteria or more than one clashes on which you're going to go ahead and actually judge the debate on. So you basically need to weigh these criterias. Okay, I think screen sharing stopped. Sanjeev, are you there? No worries, I'll just share my screen. Just a second. Is my screen visible? Alright, thanks, Bhargav. 1 second, yeah. Now, yeah, so that's what it is, right? When there are multiple criteria, right, then you need to order those criteria in terms of relevance, right? That which criteria is something that weighs over all other criteria. What is something that is very, very important? Just a second. Yeah, no worries. what is one criteria that is very very important in this particular debate, and that is something that needs to be addressed by all the houses. When you go ahead and do that, when you go ahead and weigh argumentations, then you can go ahead and actually judge the debate fruitfully, you can judge the debate correctly. So that is what is weighing competing frameworks. Now, burdens. I think burdens have been covered a lot by, again, Smith, Devagya, and I agree. Now, there are like three types of burdens that are attached to all of your speeches, which is firstly motion burdens. That is, they're depending on the type of motion that you're talking about. I think a lot of them has been covered in APD, introduction to APD, etc. So if you've not watched like specific motion burdens, then go ahead and watch that workshop. But there are like certain burdens that are attached to one particular type of motion, that is like maybe THBD, THS, THO. So that is one burden that you need to fulfill when you're debating on one particular motion, right? Other than that, there's speaker role fulfillment, again, which it has been talked about very well, wherein if you're the speaker, then if you're the PM, then what are the things that you need to bring in within a debate? If you're the whip, what is something that you need to bring in within the debate? You need to go ahead and analyze the debate, rebut your arguments, etc., etc. That is again something that is very very clear. Definitions and models. Now again, models come in when there's that particular sort of debate. There is wherein like DHW or wherein that's this house would. Now there you go need to go ahead and propose a model, as in how if you're the government you're going to implement a particular model, or if you're the opposition then you need to go ahead and provide a counter proposition, um, and go ahead and flesh it out how things are going to work, how things are not going to work. Definitions, again, definitions are also the speaker role of the prime minister, wherein you need to actually go ahead and set the debate, define a lot of argument, define what certain things mean in your debate, etc., etc. A lot of it has been covered by Agri. So, what I mean for burdens in adjudicating, right? If you do not fulfill these burdens, right, then your debate is simply not fruitful. If you go ahead and actually half of your war is already won, because now you have like very significant backing to whatever you're going to say, because everything that you've done has actually led you to this point wherein anything you say is going to hold true because of the mechanization that you back up stuff with. So any sort of burdens that you think might arise in your entire debate need to be fulfilled. Now opposing the debate, that is something that is again also like very very implicit for people who are on the opposition, right? Whenever the government goes ahead and says anything, you need to oppose it. How do you oppose it? You actually go ahead and prove to me why their argumentation is not going to hold A, or you can go ahead and tell me how your world or whatever you're trying to prove is something that is going to hold, that is actually going to hold over whatever what was put forward by the government. Or you can go ahead and simply just mechanize why they're wrong, why they're actually their outlook is actually very very wrong. You can simply not say that this is not going to hold, their arguments are not going to hold. You need to sufficiently back it up with, say there's a policy, then you need to give a counter policy. If there's a model, then you need to give your own model. So that is how you oppose a debate. And opposition basically has to like bring down or cut down the case that is built by the government in the first place, and that is how you oppose. So that is one implicit burden that comes in for all the opposing benches, right? That is opening opposition, closing opposition. You need to go ahead and oppose whatever your government is saying, and that is all for burdens. You need to fulfill your burdens to be able to win a debate. If you do not fulfill your burdens, then you're likely going to lose the debate because you simply do not answer the key or core issues that need to be addressed in the debate. Next slide, please. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I am sharing the slides. Yeah. Now, all good. The debate has happened. Now we need to decide the results. That is it for all debaters. Now, what do judges need to do? Once you listen to all the speeches, right, you need to go ahead and come to a decision. Now, what does a judging panel look like? Now, the judging panel will consist of one chair, the chair who actually, chairs the entire panel, and the additional judges termed as wings. Now, wings consist of panelists and trainees. I'll be coming to the difference between panelists and trainees later. Now, sorry. Once the debate has finished, right, now the debaters will go ahead and leave the room, and judges will collectively rank the four teams in order, which is they will rank them first, second, third, and fourth. Now, judges do this through actually deliberation or deliberating between which team should be ranked first, second, third, and fourth. This is actually different from APD. How? In APDs, what you do is actually you go ahead and tell me, you do not disclose your results. You get a certain like 8 to 10 minutes of prep time, and then all judges go ahead and give your OA. This is not something that happens here. Here, 20 minutes are given to all judges for them to go ahead and discuss their verdict. Now, deliberation happens in a lot of ways, but it usually happens in the way that a chair leads the discussion, a chair leads the entire deliberation, and then usually in the best possible scenario, all the wings, all the panelists go ahead and come to a consensus, come to a like fixed ordering, which is first, second, third, and fourth, and then the chair solely goes ahead and gives the verdict and gives their oral adjudication. Note that in BPDs, all judges do not, go ahead and give OAs. The only the chair goes ahead and gives the OA to the room. Now, deliberations are 20 minutes long in world style. However, it can vary depending on your competition. Just check with the organizing committee as in whatever the time for deliberation is. Now, ideally, what happens is 70 minutes are allocated for deliberation, and the next 3 minutes the judges can fill the ballot. What do we mean by ballot is something that I'll again be discussing later. Yeah, filling the ballot, right? Now, filling the ballot is also something that is very, very crucial. Now, the chair actually goes ahead and fills the ballot on behalf of all the panelists that are there. So, only one ballot is filled. And how do we do that? Now, suppose in the first 17 minutes we have come to a consensus, we have four teams ranked in order. Now, when we are allocating speaker scores, the chair actually goes ahead and has a discussion between all the panelists and allocates scores based on a certain speaker score scale that on whichever metric that they fall on, they go ahead and assign that particular score. Now we must note that whenever we are scoring each individual, so their combined score, as in like since two people consist of a team, comprise of a team, right? In BPDs, so their collective score should be the score that is the highest if they're first, and should be the lowest if they're last. So that's pretty much it. There, I have attached the speaker score scale for all of your reference. So like 95 to 100 is like the best speeches ever given. Our typical range in BPDs, right, is like 65 to 85. It is generally higher in BPDs than APDs. So, however, if you think that it is correct, if you think that the speaker deserved more than 85, then go ahead, give it. But be sure that that speaker has actually given a very, very good speech. So typically, what scores range usually is like 75 is for an average speech, and I think above that is based on the scale. 85 is where you get go very, very high, and you have actually listened to a very, very good speech. This is a speaker scale. Refer to this once we share the slides, and you'll be good to go. Yes, announcing the verdict, right? Now, the chair of the panel, as I already mentioned, delivers the oral adjudication. And what is an oral adjudication basically, right? Now, an oral adjudication is basically firstly conveying the overall verdict of the debate, but other than that, providing reasons as in uh, why this entire verdict holds in the very first place. So now the judge or the chair needs to give you like certain perfect reasons on why they rank you this way. Yeah. Now, there's a basic structure that we usually follow. You feel free to modify it if you feel like that's something that is good. However, this is a structure that works for most people, works for people who go ahead and actually break, right? Now, firstly, you start with announcing the result. You announce the ranking of the teams and the structure of the speech. What does this look like? You simply go ahead and tell them whoever ranks first, second, third, and fourth. That is something that you need to do in the beginning of your speech, because teams do not need to hunt down in your debate who ranks first and who ranks second. It is your primary job to go ahead and tell them firstly that you have ranked first and you have ranked last. Other than that, you need to introduce your structure of the speech. So that maybe looks like you firstly going ahead and giving the verdict, which you already gave. Then you can go ahead and maybe talk about the motion, you can talk about comparisons, you can talk about certain weighing analysis, you can talk about any feedback or any sort of improvement that teams might have made on their bench for them to have won in general, right? So that is something that you announce before, so the people know that what they're going to listen to in the next like 10 minutes. Now, explain the ranking of the teams. That is something that you need to firstly do, which is either you need to explain however you rank, either in order of however they were ranked. That is why the first team wins over the second, third, and fourth, why the second team wins over the third and fourth, why the third team wins over the fourth, and why the fourth teams come last. Now, the something that you might think is correct, but is actually wrong and is actually a mistake in Ajin is when you prove that since 1 is greater than 2, that means since 1 is greater than 2 and 2 is greater than 3, that means 1 is greater than 3. This is something that is not good. You need to actually go ahead and independently analyze why the winning team wins over all three benches. So something like 1 is greater than 2 and 2 is greater than 3 is that is why 1 is greater than 3 is something that you cannot do. And this is actually a mistake that is made by most people when they tell me that the first team ranks first because they were better than the second team, and the second team ranks first. The second team ranks second because they were better than the third team, and the third team ranks third because they were better than the fourth team. This is something that is implicit, comparison, and this simply does not hold. Other than that, if you think that this is not something that is going to sufficiently analyze your debate or sufficiently be able to prove why you rank the teams in this certain way, then you can go ahead and actually uh, compare team wise. What does that look like? And this is actually a little more complex version of analyzing and comparing two teams, comparing four teams, right? Wherein let's say that we start with opening government, right? So you need to prove to me why opening government wins or loses over opening opposition. This is called like bench comparison. Then you need to yeah, no, this is known as half comparison, wherein you compare both the opening half teams. Then you go ahead and compare opening government with closing government. This is called as bench comparison, wherein you compare teams on the same bench and rank whoever was higher in the overall ranking as the person who took over the other. And then you go ahead and compare opening government with closing opposition. This is actually known as the long diagonal, wherein the first team and the last team is compared, and then a short diagonal is when you compare opening opposition with closing government. This is known as the short diagonal. So what you inherently need to do is basically compare each team with the other, and this is how you analyze in the other way. This is especially done when you think that it is very important for all teams to be ranked with all teams in general to be able to prove why your entire verdict stands. So you can choose either one. I think for starters, you can just go ahead and explain why 1 is greater than 2, why 1 is greater than 3, 1 is greater than 4, then 2 is greater than 3, 2 is greater than 4, and then finally 3 is greater than 4, and why 4 ranks last. That is something that is easier to do, and that is something that is more comprehensible because from personal experience, a lot of debaters, especially who have recently joined debating in general, do not understand the entire concept of comparing short diagonals and long diagonals. It's simply very confusing. So go ahead and just explain the rankings for now. Now, be specific and detailed, like identify your arguments, identify all, the weighing criteria that you're putting forward for arguments, why you're like considering one criteria to be the most important, why you're considering the least important criteria to be the least important, something that you need to be very, very descriptive about, because teams almost always love detailed version of why they ranked first or why they ranked last. They need to know why their argumentations, why their line of argumentation is not as effective as the winning teams, or why their argumentation was the best line of argumentation that you could have chosen in that debate. So that is something that you need to do. Be very, very detailed in your way if you're delivering in a way, because it is very, very important. Yeah, again, you need to identify which teams get credit for what and how how this influences your call in the very first place, right? Be very very comparative, be very very specific, as in which team wins over which team and for what reason. This is all you need to explain throughout your entire comparisons of each of teams with each other. Now, when you're done with this and if you're left with time, then provide any general advice on how teams can improve. When you do that, right, the teams get more more accepting of your verdict, as in, because when you rank them, no one wants to be ranked last, right? So when you go ahead and tell them that this is something that you could have pushed, which would have led you to counter all other teams and actually go ahead and be the very best team. When you go ahead and do that, the teams are more accepting of your verdict. They understand where they fell off, and that again comes from a lot of weighing that you do, a lot of comparisons that you do, a lot of weighing of arguments wherein you put one argumentation over the other, so you can just then go ahead and tell them why they should have gone with some other line of argumentation in general. Now, again, that's just to not be general, be very specific. Again, do not penalize teams for their approach to the motion. For example, you cannot go ahead and say that you should have said this particular thing about this motion, and just because you did not say it, I'm going to rank last. That is not the analysis that you want to do. You can go ahead and tell them what approach they could have gone with when you're done with all the comparisons. During your comparison, you cannot go ahead and tell the teams that you should have said this. Since you did not say this, you're ranking fourth. That is something that you cannot do. You cannot also, criticize them on the approach they took for the motion during comparing comparisons, as in your approach to this motion was wrong and their approach was right, which is why I credit that team over your team. There is something again that you cannot do. You can just go ahead and tell them that your line of argumentation does not weigh as heavily as their line of argumentation. I think their line of argumentation is more relevant, which is why they win the debate. That is something that you can do. And of course, do not judge format rather than content. You need to be very specific of not being biased over any sort of styles that might exist, any sort of accents that might exist. Just be an ordinary intelligent voter and judge them very unbiasedly. Yeah, lastly, the very last topic, feedback on adjudicators. Now, you must be wondering, if panelists do not go ahead and give the oral adjudication, how exactly do panelists or trainees get promoted to chair or panel in general? Because if the teams are not scoring them, then who scores them? Now, in BPDs, there are three types of scorings or three types of feedbacks that are provided. One is teams' feedback on the judge who delivered the adjudication, who in most normal cases is the chair who delivers the adjudication. So the first kind of feedback is the feedback from teams on the judge or on the chair who delivered the adjudication. Next is chair's feedback on wings and trainees. So during the deliberation, when the chair actually goes ahead and leads the discussion, he also marks the panelists and the trainees based on their input, based on their understanding of the motion, because they're capable of doing so. So they go ahead and tell them, they go ahead and score them on the basis of the understanding that they have of the very particular motion. So that is the second kind of feedback, wherein chair gives feedback on the wings and trainees. And lastly, there is for unbiased opinion, because if the chair is not good enough, then the trainees and panelists also have the right to, if they were not able to lead the discussion well, etc., etc., then the wings and trainees can also give feedback on the chair, as in maybe the chair was not leading the deliberation well enough or did not go ahead and uh, provide his or her input properly in the entire debate or in the entire discussion. So that is again something that you need to do. So BP is actually very very fair, wherein your teams can also give you feedback, your chair gives feedback to the trainees, and the trainees and panelists give feedback on the chair. So yeah, again, there is this scale that I've attached. You can go through it later. Chairs are is scored on a scale of 0 to 10, average being around 6 or 7. Then you can go higher if they're very very good and lower if they're very bad. Yeah, this is the scale on which wings and trainees score the chair, as well how on the scale on which the team members or the debaters score the chair on the basis of their oral adjudication. This is the scale for chairs, and this is the scale for panelists and trainee, on which the chair goes ahead and scores them. So this is based on mostly deliberation or the type of deliberation that they have. Again, the same score scale from 0 to 10. Yes, and that is pretty much it. Thank you so much. Yeah, that is all. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm so sorry this took so long, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask right now. Am I audible right now? Alright, great. So I'm assuming there are no further questions. If you have any feedback for us to improve, go ahead and give that as well. We'll be very happy. Okay. Uh, yeah. Assuming there are no questions, I'll be waiting for like 2 minutes. If you have any questions related to maybe the competition tomorrow, I3 is here, she'll clear all of that. If you have any questions from any portions of the today's presentation, be it Smith's part, be it Devaga's part, I3's part, anyone's or mine, go ahead and ask. It's okay. Okay, I'll be waiting till 11:33 and then we can all drop off. Hi, yes, Ash, go on.
The not a question, but just a request to all the senior members. Like, if you guys can arrange a mock for us with your guidance and all that, it will be really helpful.
Sure. Were you not there when we were doing it before Gambit?
No, not really. I was a bit busy that time.
Alright, no worries.
I did attended that workshop though, explaining about what is Gambit and how we need to prepare. But no, I didn't
Alright.
attend that.
Alright, then no worries. Are you debating tomorrow by any chance?
Not tomorrow exactly, but I'm willing to participate on the other competition that will be taking place later on.
Alright, great. So yeah, we'll be scheduling mocks for all of you, just like we did before Gambit. So just when like this week start, the next week starts, right? We'll be arranging all sorts of mocks, any number of mocks that you might need, and yeah, we'll be going forward with that. There is no worries.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Great.